Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome everyone. Today we're going to be talking about Dr. D Part 4. This is the story of Christopher Duntsch. When we last left off, veteran surgeon Randall Kirby and veteran surgeon Henderson had been fighting really hard with a lot of the medical boards to make sure that they would revoke Christopher Duntsch's licenses to practice and perform surgery. And until they had gathered all of the information from all of his botched surgeries, they had to really press really hard for that. And it wouldn't happen until December of 2013. Around this time that he had his license revoked, Christopher Duntsch ran into some very bad problems. For starters, his girlfriend, Wendy Young, would actually not only leave him, but completely move away and take the two children with her. Mainly because of the fact people would speculate because he had lost his job as a doctor. But even more importantly, at that year, Christopher Duntsch would actually have to file for bankruptcy because at the time he had accumulated and gotten himself over $1 million in debt. There, Christopher Duntsch would actually relocate and would move all the way to Colorado to be closer to his parents. He would then call his father and tell him that he needed money, and his father would actually wire him $1,000. It was there that he would be caught going into a local Walmart, and he would be packing his cart full of very expensive and unimportant things like expensive pants, expensive cologne, and he would actually take his current pants off and put the new pants on in a changing room and try to hide all the cologne and different expensive items that he had gotten to try to steal them. And they got caught on camera in the Walmart, and as he was walking out, he would actually find himself seeing the police and would be arrested. But this would not be the last time that he would be in handcuffs with the police. They would say that later on, after this incident, that Christopher Duntsch was actually caught at a building and people had to call the cops because he was banging on the windows and doors and screaming that his family was in danger. There, the cops would actually come and arrest Duntsch again, but take him to the psychiatric ward. Kirby and Henderson would finally get some leeway and would actually find that they could actually criminally charge Christopher Duntsch for all his botched surgeries. In July of 2015, only a year and a half after his license was revoked, they would actually arrest Christopher Duntsch on 6 felony charges and an assault charge. At this point in time, Christopher Duntsch was completely penniless from being in debt, and he had no money to hire himself a lawyer, so the court actually had to appoint him one. But time was of the essence because they only had 4 months before the statute of limitation had ran out. And the last charge that they would charge him with was the maiming and paralyzing of Mary Efford. During trial, they would bring up multiple people talking about Christopher Duntsch's incompetence. They would even go and talk about during Mary Efford's surgery that multiple times they had to pinpoint areas that he was messing up the surgery and even having to point out where he needed to be operating, despite what Christopher Duntsch was saying. They even received a floppy disk of the recovery surgery and showing all the mistakes that happened on her back. There was one time that a bunch of nurses also testified and said that they were under the impression that Christopher Duntsch was using cocaine or drinking during surgeries. And they would talk about an incident where he would wear some scrubs to an operating room, and they realized these were the same scrubs that he had worn for 3 days in a row. And the only reason they knew it was the same scrubs was because On the back side of the bottoms of the scrubs, there was a hole about the size of a nickel, and they realized that he had worn these same exact scrubs for 3 days. This was also very shocking to a lot of people in the courtroom, because in a lot of cases, if a doctor or nurse goes to trial, fellow doctors and nurses will not testify against them, but they did for Christopher Duntsch. If you remember in one of our earlier videos, I had talked about a nurse receiving an email and Christopher Duntsch referring to himself as God, the Antichrist, and Albert Einstein. And he would also make a statement within that email calling himself a cold-blooded killer. They would actually get this email and other emails that Christopher Duntsch had sent in that 2-year period that he was a doctor. On February 20th, 2017, only after 12 days, the jury would return with a verdict, and they would find Christopher Duntsch guilty, and they would sentence him to life in prison. News media would come out and they would give Christopher Duntsch many nicknames. To name a few, some newspaper articles would refer to him as Dr. D. Other newspaper articles would also nickname him Dr. Death, not to be mistaken for an actual serial killer that went by the same nickname. Right now, Christopher Duntsch is in prison. He is not eligible for parole until 2045. He will be 74 years old.
How was surgery?
Perfect.
Perfect. Excellent. I heard it went a little long.
You heard.
I did.
A little long. Do you mind if I ask who you heard that from?
Oh, there's no need to name names.
I'm just
Dr.
not used to people talking shit about me.
No one's talking shit about you.
Unless voices to my face, which I encourage.
As the chief executive.
It was that suck-ass circulating nurse, wasn't it?
I asked.
In July of 2021, Peacock would release a show called Dr. Death. Season 1 would have an 8-episode miniseries about Christopher Duntsch. Joshua Jackson would actually star and play a very, very good role as Christopher Duntsch. The show would also star Alec Baldwin and Christian Slater as the veteran surgeons Kirby and Henderson. An actual docuseries would be released after the show called Dr. Death, which would actually be a docuseries that would have interviews with not only family members, but would also have interviews with some of the patients that Christian Duntsch had actually operated on. Baylor Plano would actually have to deal with a lot of lawsuits filed by the former patients of Christopher Duntsch, and a lot of these patients would have to reappeal these cases. They are still getting lawsuits from his former patients to this day. Altogether, Christopher Duntsch would have 38 patients that he would operate on in 2 years. All 36 were left maimed and physically injured for the rest of their lives, 2 of which would unfortunately lose their life.